So, welcome back to another episode of Time Out with the Sports Doctor podcast. Hope your week is off to a great start. This week, I'm very excited to share with you an episode that means a lot to me. This episode is where I recapped a lot of the final moments that I was able to share with my grandfather. I was able to talk about trying to build a legacy for our family. And when you think about legacy, what does that mean to you? You know, many times when we think about legacy, we think about passing along money to the next generation. But as you know, it's much more than a financial transaction. Legacy is about passing along family values, about passing along rituals, about leaving people or leaving the place where you've been in a better place. And that's what I really like to concentrate on. So I'm really happy to be able to share this episode with you. Hopefully, it will remind you of some things that you appreciate about your own family and the legacy that you want to leave and the impact you want to make on society. So stay tuned and enjoy this episode. All right, welcome back to another episode of Time Out with the Sports Doctor podcast. And it is January 15th, 2024, when this episode is being released, a day that has been set aside to honor the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who gave his life for many others. And it's been a tradition that I've honored Dr. Martin Luther King on his day since I've had my podcast. And we will do the same today, but today we do it from a different manner. Something that I had no intentions of doing was honoring the life and legacy of my grandfather, Charlie Burgess Sr., affectionately known as Big Daddy to many, as well as to this podcast. I had the opportunity to interview him as my first guest, and the episode released on 6/20/2021, where we sat down and actually discussed his full life. And I'm very glad that we had that, because many times history gets lost, but to have that recorded is very important to me and to my children and to the legacy truly of the family. So what I plan to do today is to do what I've been doing a lot of, which is reflecting on the memories that I have, all the way back from age 3 at his house, where I split my ear open, to our final ride at the age of 43. So at least 40 years that I can remember his life and the impact that he's had on me, getting me to the point where I am. But the impact was so much greater than just his family. It was on the community, it was on the state, and truly on the nation. Born August 13th, 1928, Big Daddy was nearly 5 months older than Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They were contemporaries, they were colleagues, and he would say that he did not have a front row seat, or he was not on the front row. He was simply in the crowd. He did not have an important role in the global efforts of Dr. Martin Luther King, but definitely in the local efforts in the state of Alabama and the Southeast region. And as you know, or many of you know, the civil rights movement was closely tied with the church. And Big Daddy was a pastor of a church for many years during this period of time. So I remember many stories that he told. I remember many sayings that he did. So what we're going to do is look at 3 different things: faith, family, and philanthropy. In that order, his relationship with God was definitely number 1. As I mentioned, as an ordained minister, but much bigger than that, as his daily walk. He lived his life truly as a servant to God and to man. He's a father of 5, but he cared for so many other people and other people's children, no matter what it would be. He did that despite race or socioeconomic class. Once you met him, you knew that you had met a special person, because he lived by the theme that he wanted to live his life so that he would be missed when he was gone, and that he definitely did. So he always talked about his relationship with God and his faith with God, and how God protected him, especially during the days of growing up on a plantation, through the days of the civil rights movement, being in places where you knew that you were a target, or you knew that death was imminent, or death was around the corner, or death could happen at any time, but not walking in fear, but walking by faith It's something that he learned to do in his life, and that he shared that message with others and encouraged others to live that same way, and to show your love for God by your love for mankind, treating your family well, and not only treating those who love you, but treating your enemies well, you know, in addition to that. So you will be hard pressed to find people to say anything bad about his life, truly because of the way that he lived. And then the second thing I would say was family. No one ever doubted that he loved who he called, affectionately called his mama, which was Delia Burgess, his wife of over 75 years. During the last days when he was apart, he would always just ask, how's mama doing? What's going on with mama? Is she getting the care and the treatment that he needed? And he wanted to spend his last days and every moment that he possibly could in her presence. And from that union came 5 children, very blessed that they're all still alive as well. 5 adult children, many grandchildren, and great grandchildren. But as I mentioned before, not only his immediate family, he cared for the community in the same manner that he cared for his own family. He would always make sure that the needs were met of his church members, or for those who could not take care of themselves. He would always pass out turkeys on Christmas to those that were less fortunate. He would raise money to help pay bills for people, help get people out of jail, whatever it needed to be, he would do it. It's no task too big or no task that he felt was beneath him in his service for mankind. As I mentioned, I had the ability to interview him. Please go back and listen to that episode. He talked about his life growing up as a young man and being able to, or being forced to work daily on the plantation, and how that compromised his education. So, due to the fact that he had to live a life where he was deprived of education, he emphasized education in his children's lives as well as in my life personally. I can recall even from kindergarten on, when we got a report card showing it to Big Daddy, and the excitement that he would have for our good grades. I think the current pay rate was $1 for an A and 50 cents for a B, but he wanted to incentivize us to show the importance of what education was, because he knew that that was your way out, the way to break the social norms, the way to break through the socioeconomic ceiling that had been placed on so many African Americans coming out of the post slavery era, where working and farming was truly the only way to survive. So education was not emphasized. So he made that an emphasis for us. And he showed that in his own life after having to drop out of high school to be able to work at the age of 16, still not give it up on formal education, going back to get his GED as an adult, and eventually earning a degree in Christian education at the age of 63 years old, showed his determination to be educated. And his formal education, but also he had so much that life had taught him, and so many life experiences that he passed on. I think that's so important. I'm very blessed to be able to have a grandfather, who lived to 95 years old and had sound mind, was able to still, even in the last days, talk about family history and talk about his experiences. And that's so valuable. And the richness of his stories, I never get tired of hearing him tell those same stories over and over. So education, keeping the family together is what he would always say. And he was truly the glue. So he wanted to impress upon us the importance of keeping your family together, not only the immediate unit of the husband, wife with your children, but also keeping the family, the extended family together. And even bigger than that, keeping the communities together, to be able to, because we know that the needs of some people are not met in their immediate home. So being able to, or being willing to take care of other people, was something that he definitely emphasized as well. And that's a lesson that I believe I'm a giver now, because I grew up watching him give, and I grew up watching him serve. I grew up watching him go to marches and go to rallies and fight for rights for all mankind, not only for himself, but to fight for the greater good. The other thing I would like to touch upon is philanthropy. Big Daddy was a giver like none other that I've really seen. Like I said, he would give his last to make sure that someone else had enough. He served for many years in the NAACP on the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Scholarship Foundation. He raised money each year to be able to give out scholarships to high school students to try to lessen the burden of college education for many people who could not afford it. And that's something that he was very important to him. For over 30 years, I can recall Dr. Martin Luther King Scholarship Foundation. And I was a recipient of it in 1998. And I was able to actually speak at his last year of being president in 2018. I was the keynote speaker at the symposium, which was something that was very important to me. And as I mentioned before, education, Big Daddy always called me Dr. Derrick. When he would call me on the phone, it was Dr. Derrick. When he would talk to me about his friends and colleagues, it was Dr. Derrick. When he would introduce me to anyone else, it was Dr. Derrick. And I asked him, why did you call me Dr. Derrick, or what does it mean to you to be able to say Dr. Derrick? And he said, I say Dr. Derrick because I'm proud of you. I say Dr. Derrick because I have a sense of pride in knowing that you did not let my efforts go in vain, that you are continuing to build off of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that you are not wasting the doors that were opened by the bloodshed, by the lives that were lost in the civil rights movement, and that you have the ability to now make an impact on the world through the field of medicine. So I do not take it lightly because I always know because of them, we can, right? Because of the sacrifices of many before, because of the bloodshed of many before, we are given opportunities now that was not available in the 1950s to 1960s. So doors that my grandparents could not walk through, I can now walk through or have access to and be able to operate in hospitals, be able to serve in boardrooms, be able to invest with groups or sit in restaurants or go to hotels that they had no access to. So that meant a lot, the fact that I was able to achieve my medical degree. I'm able to excel in education because that was something that he was deprived of, but was very important to him. As healthcare providers, we spend a large portion of our lives focused on our training as well as taking care of other individuals. But I'm calling a timeout because life can change in an instant. We know it's difficult to fathom that a sudden illness, injury, or death could put you and your family in a devastating financial situation. But that's where Dr. Stephanie Pearson and her unique team of advisors at Pearson Ravitz come into play. They focus on empowering physicians like yourself to protect your most valuable asset, your income, and life's most important people, your family. So go to pearsonravitz.com to make sure that you are protected today. So also with philanthropy, it doesn't have to be the big things. What I want to empower everyone is everyone can make a difference. Everyone might not be able to be the president. Everyone might not be able to give away scholarships, but everyone has the ability to impact the lives of others. Whether it's picking up trash, in someone's yard, or being able to help open a door for someone who might not be able to open it for themselves. We all can do things to help others. And I will continue to live my life in that manner to pay tribute to his life and legacy. And just kind of reflecting back, I mentioned the last ride. Well, when I was home for Thanksgiving this year, he was in a rehab facility, and being able to watch his last few months. I mean, you're talking about a 95-year-old man who's still living independently at home with his wife, still driving, still able to go and come truthfully. He just had to be home. His curfew was sundown, so he had to be home to like kids, had to be home before the sun was down. But you're talking about someone who is still living life to the fullest for the majority of 2023, and then having to lose that independence And as a physician, we know about how much, especially in orthopedics with fractures, we know about that loss of independence. Many times we see it in the elderly with hip fractures, but anything that takes away somebody's mobility can definitely take away their independence. And in those last few months where he had to be in, a rehab facility or in and out of the hospital, that definitely took a toll on his life. But being able to spend that significant time with him during Thanksgiving is moments that I will always cherish. And I recall going over to his rehab facility on Thanksgiving morning to visit him, to surprise him, really. And we sat there for a while, and something told me, see if he can leave. And it might have been my wife that said, can Big Daddy leave? So I went to the front desk, talked to the nurse, said, can he be checked out? She said, sure. So without telling him, I wanted to make sure that I could get all the arrangements. So we got him in a wheelchair, put him in the car, and took him to my parents' house. So he was able to spend that time with family. But as I pulled up to my parents' house, trying to make arrangements of how to get him out of the car, he said, before you take me out, can we ride for a little bit? I said, sure. So we rode through the community. He lives approximately 10 minutes away, and he wanted to ride around his own land and property. But we literally rode for about 30 minutes to get there. We rode by his old place of employment at Reynolds Metals. We rode by his brother's house, Shag Burgess, and the property that he owned and farmed as a child and as a teenager. We rode by his former church. We rode through several different communities as he would point out who lived here and who owned this and who owned that. And then we made it to his house. He said, let's just turn, let's drive down the driveway. Nobody ever know we're here. Because his wife was still at home at that point. He pointed out several things, and he just wanted to make sure everything was fine. And then we took that same route back, and we continued to just talk for what was an hour. And he thanked me for that time because little did we know at that point that was truly the most time that he would spend outside for the rest of his life. So I'm very glad, number one, that I took the opportunity to spend time with him at the end of his life and to do something, to go out of my way, to get out of my comfort zone, to give him an opportunity to truly see the world again. Like I said, he struggled at the end with the loss of independence because he was such an independent person and he was used to being on the go, used to doing for others. So I just want to impress upon you that life is precious, that time is valuable. As I talk about many times on this podcast, time is our most valuable asset. So don't delay in doing the things that you want to do with your loved ones to a later date because that date might not come. Another thing, going back to the interview that I did 3 years ago with my grandfather, sitting with this same microphone in place, and I was using this pink hand weight because the microphone would not sit down at that point. I had an Alabama pom pom sitting over top of it simply to cover it because I didn't want the pink weight on camera. And if you know Big Daddy, he was a big Roll Tide Roll fan. We had many conversations about Alabama and Auburn. But at the end of the conversation, he said, at some point, I have to leave. And he reached for the pom pom and he said, this tosser is like a torch. Hold out your hand. And he said, at some point, the torch has to go from my hand to your hand. And at some point, it will be your responsibility to tell your children and your grandchildren about my life and my legacy, as well as the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Not only tell them about it, but continue to live the goals and dreams that he had, because it was truly wanting everyone to have equality, wanting everyone to have an opportunity. I mean, we were talking about the basics of life to be able to equal the playing field for mankind. So the time has come where he can no longer carry on the torch. And it's up to me, it's up to everyone who came across his path, everyone who he ever did to help someone to carry on his legacy. And I accept that challenge. A void is there for the family, a void is there for the community, which cannot be filled by one person. I mean, we're truly talking about one of the last few remnants of leaders from that era of the civil rights movement. Pretty much everybody else is dead and gone. But it's now up to you and me to carry out that mission. So, Big Daddy, thank you for all that you did for me as a child, as a grown man. I will always cherish the times that we had. I will always carry with me the memories, and I will always live my life to make you proud as Dr. Derrick. I forgot about the fact that you were the first episode on this podcast. But before there were podcasts, there was the radio. He hosted a show for all of my life. And I was able to be a guest on his show as well. So even this podcast has his fingerprints all over it. Likely the reason that I want to do this podcast, even though I don't know it, is because of seeds that were sown into me through you and through his life and legacy, and watching him do and move and do the things that he did. So I'm grateful for the 43 years that I was able to be in your presence. I'm grateful for being able to watch the impact that he made on so many others. And I'm ready to now carry the torch for Charlie Ross Burgess Sr., aka Big Daddy. I love you, I miss you, and I honor you with my life. So one thing is being able to be a doctor. So I know that I'm standing on the shoulders of, you, Dr. Martin Luther King, my father who integrated the school systems, and many people who gave their lives in bloodshed. So to see me be able to achieve the fact of being able to graduate from medical school, I know that every time you get to say Dr. Derrick, you feel a lot of pride. Tell me about that.
I feel a lot of pride, and I really mean it to my heart. That Dr. Derrick that I said to you on a day-to-day basis, even now when I call you, let me speak to Dr. Derrick for a minute. Even it's Dr. Derrick, Dr. Derrick. It's Dr. Derrick because I feel so proud of you, Doctor, that you are Dr. Derrick, that you are working at this hospital, that you are getting the benefit of keeping the dream alive of Dr. Martin Luther King and the march alive of your granddaddy who marched with Dr. Martin Luther King, that could see his grandson being working and holding this position, but not to stop right there. I would like to see you, Dr. Derrick, to carry the light on forward. Now, we're going to call this the light, we're going to call this the light. Now, at the age of 92, somewhere down the line, Big Daddy got to get out of here.
Right.
I know that I'm going. I ain't ready to go right now. I ain't going to stop. But when Big Daddy leave out of here, hold your right hand up. Big Daddy wants the bar to be passed from my hand because I'm gone home to live with the Lord. It's going to be in your hand. It'll be left up to you to tell your children and your children's children that I got the tosser in my hand, and I'm going to encourage you to move on and keep the dream alive of my granddaddy and the Martin Luther King. There's the hope.
So you're talking about passing the torch, symbolically passing the torch.
Yes, you.